Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The Harry Potter films have become a part of pop culture, but despite their visual splendor, they contain scenes that even the most loyal fans find baffling. These moments don't just look ridiculous, they break narrative logic, ruin the atmosphere, and sometimes outright mislead the audience. Today, let's break down the scenes that confused, disappointed, and made many wonder what on earth were the screenwriters thinking. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Harry and Voldemort in the Clock Tower, Deathly Hallows Part 2. The final installment of the saga was meant to be a grand culmination, a battle between good and evil, willpower and magic. But instead of an epic magical duel, we got something utterly bizarre. When Harry and Voldemort confront each other in the clock tower, darkness thickens, the moment is intense, and suddenly Voldemort seems to forget that he's a powerful wizard. He doesn't cast a single spell. Instead, he starts punching Harry, choking him, and even kicking him. Harry, having no better idea, grabs Voldemort by the neck and jumps off with him. Brilliant plan, especially considering Voldemort can fly and Harry can't. Plot armor saves the boy who lived, but this scene remains one of the most absurd moments in the finale of a legendary story. Number 2. The Death Eaters attack on the Burrow, Half-Blood Prince. Visually impressive, yes, logical, not in the slightest. First, we're treated to a strange conversation about shoelaces, meant to hint at the budding feelings between Harry and Ginny. In reality, it feels like an awkward date between two teens who've never been alone before. But all of that pales compared to the sudden Death Eater attack. Bellatrix Lestrange and her companions burst onto the scene, set the Burrow ablaze, and then run off. Why? For what purpose? How? None of these questions are answered. The attack has zero effect on the plot. In the next film, the Burrow is intact. According to the book, the Order of the Phoenix had placed strong protective spells on the house, but the filmmakers ignored that in favor of action. The result? A scene that feels completely pointless. Number 3. Arrival of Beauxbaton and Durmstrang, Goblet of Fire. A scene meant to showcase the grandeur and diversity of the magical world turned into a theatrical parody. Beauxbaton is presented as a girls' academy where students twirl gracefully and release butterflies, while Durmstrang arrives like a gang of burly men stomping in with sticks and battle chants. It looks more like a talent show than the arrival of prestigious, magical schools. Worse still, it gives viewers who haven't read the books a completely false impression that Beauxbaton is for girls and Durmstrang for boys. In the books, both schools admit students of all genders. The stylized illusion damages the substance and distorts the very nature of the magical world. Number 4. Ron destroys the Horcrux, Deathly Hallows Part 1. The locket, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, was supposed to drive a final wedge between Harry, Ron, and Hermione. But the filmmakers turned it into grotesque theater. Just before Ron destroys the artifact, phantom versions of Harry and Hermione emerge from the locket. They taunt Ron and then start passionately kissing. The camera lingers uncomfortably long, creating awkwardness instead of emotional intensity. Rather than instantly destroying the Horcrux, Ron stands frozen, watching this surreal spectacle. A moment that should have been tense and powerful becomes something closer to a parody. Number 5. Harry's Breakdown, Prisoner of Azkaban. Prisoner of Azkaban is often called the best adaptation, and with good reason. But even it has its odd moments. When Harry learns in Hogsmeade from the professors that Sirius Black, once his parents' friend, allegedly betrayed them, his reaction is puzzling. He storms off alone, sits on a rock and cries for several minutes. Then he screams at Hermione that he'll kill Sirius the first chance he gets. We expected quiet shock, internal grief. Instead, we got a dramatic meltdown that doesn't align with the Harry we know, resilient, reserved, deeply emotional. The scene is intense, but in the wrong direction. Number 6. The Slug Club Dinner, Half-Blood Prince. Professor Slughorn is a colourful, charming character full of flair. His famous Slug Club is meant to be a refined gathering of talented students discussing their futures and connections. But in the film, the dinner becomes awkward. Harry suddenly stands up when Ginny walks in, drawing attention to himself. Everyone else remains seated. Why Harry did this remains a mystery. Perhaps it was meant to be chivalrous, but it just feels odd. The peak of the awkwardness arrives when Cormac McLaggen licks his fingers in full view, right in front of Hermione. Yes, teenage boys can be clumsy, but why turn this into slapstick comedy, especially at a formal dinner? Number 7. Harry and Hermione's dance, Deathly Hallows Part 1. The tent is dim, a radio hums softly. Ron is gone. Grief hangs in the air like fog. Then Harry reaches for Hermione's hand. No words, just a sudden invitation. She hesitates. He pulls her close. They begin to sway awkwardly, offbeat. Their smiles are thin, strained. It's not romantic, it's not exactly comforting, it's strange. Their bodies move without rhythm, their eyes don't meet. The silence between them screams louder than any dialogue. It's meant to be tender, but it feels like something out of a deleted scene that should have stayed deleted. In the book, nothing like this happens. Rowling wrote, Ron's departure had left a huge, gaping hole. Hermione sobbed for days, and Harry, deeply worried, sat beside her. He listened. He didn't dance. He didn't try to make her laugh. He just stayed. That was the power of their bond, quiet, unshakable loyalty. But in the film, we're given a scene that tries too hard to be meaningful. Instead of healing the silence, it deepens it. And the result is a moment that fans still debate, not because it moved them, but because it simply didn't belong. Number 8. Harry and Hermione's hair, Philosopher's Stone. Harry walks through the halls of Hogwarts with hair that never moves, perfectly parted, styled like a page from a catalogue. But in Philosopher's Stone, Rowling wrote, he had a thin face, knobbly knees, black hair, and bright green eyes. He wore round glasses, and his hair was always untidy. Always untidy. That detail was more than cosmetic, it was character. Yet the film brushes it away. Not a single strand out of place, not even after a Quidditch match. And then there's Hermione. In the book, her hair is very bushy, a tangled cloud of stubborn curls. Her look screamed intensity, nerves, brilliance. But the movie gives us neat, soft waves and a polished appearance that misses the point. It's a visual rewrite, a Hollywood gloss. The quirks that made them real, flawed, memorable, erased. The result? 2 leads who look less like children from the magical world and more like stars from a teen drama. And for many fans, that wasn't magic. It was disappointment. Number 9. Harry and Ginny's awkward kiss, Half-Blood Prince. The room of requirement is quiet. Shelves line the walls. The tension should be electric. Instead, Ginny walks up to Harry like a librarian delivering bad news. No rush of emotion, no nervous smile, just a stiff approach, a brief pause, and then an awkward, mechanical kiss. Harry barely moves. Ginny closes her eyes as if she's falling asleep, not kissing the boy she's secretly loved for years. The scene ends with her walking away, and Harry standing still, like a mannequin. It doesn't feel romantic. It feels like a rehearsal that accidentally made the final cut. In the book, their first kiss is explosive. Without thinking, without planning it, without worrying about the fact that 50 people were watching, Harry kissed her. The common room bursts into cheers. There's passion, surprise, joy. But the film strips all of that away. No tension, no build-up. Just 2 actors with no chemistry and a director who seems afraid of letting them feel anything at all. What should have been a major turning point for Harry becomes a forgettable pause in an already slow film. Number 10. Dumbledore's dramatic fall, Half-Blood Prince. The spell hits. Dumbledore's body lifts from the astronomy tower, and time slows. He doesn't just fall, he drifts, limbs spread, robes fluttering like wings. The camera pulls back. We watch him float downward in a long, drawn-out ballet of death. It should be devastating. It should make us gasp. But instead it feels oddly theatrical, like something out of a music video. Tragedy is replaced with stylized silence, and by the time he finally lands, the shock has worn off. What remains is confusion. In the book, his death is swift. Dumbledore was falling down the tower, and with a resounding crash he hit the ground. No slow motion, no drawn-out spectacle, just horror, finality. That's what made it powerful. But the film stretches it, tries to make it poetic. Instead of drawing us closer, it pushes us away. We watch from a distance, emotionally numb, and the fall feels more like an art project than a loss. Dumbledore was the heartbeat of Hogwarts. His death should have crushed the air from the room. Instead, we get slow spirals and silence. No one screams, no chaos erupts, just a perfectly choreographed fall that robs the moment of all urgency. It's not the way a legend should leave the world, it's the way a camera tests its filters. Number 11, Neville's inspiring speech, Deathly Hallows, Part 2. Neville Longbottom steps forward, his clothes torn, his face bruised, but his eyes burn with something steady, faith. Voldemort calls him out. The students hold their breath. This is the moment. In the book, he delivers a raw, powerful truth. People die every day. Friends, family. Yeah, we still lost Harry tonight, but he's still with us, in here. It's brave. It's real. It lifts the others when they're nearly broken. But in the film, something strange happens. The gravity cracks under weak humor. Instead of conviction, Neville fumbles through awkward jokes. He says he has a thing for Luna, then stops mid-thought, realizing no one is laughing. Then he babbles about how it doesn't matter that Harry's dead, only to backpedal seconds later. The speech feels patched together, his tone wavers, his timing is off. The audience doesn't feel rallied, they feel second-hand embarrassment. The dramatic rhythm is gone. Neville, once the symbol of unexpected courage, becomes a comic relief side character in the middle of a war. It's tragic because Neville earned that moment. He stood up to Death Eaters in Order of the Phoenix. He led the resistance at Hogwarts while Harry was gone. He suffered, endured, grew, and then, just as he's meant to rise, the script pulls him down with weak writing. His speech should have echoed across the ruined walls like a call to arms. Instead, it lands flat, timid, unsure, forgettable. The boy who pulled the sword from the Sorting Hat deserved better than a few half-hearted one-liners. Number 12, Voldemort Hugs Draco, Deathly Hallows Part 2. The courtyard was silent. Bodies lay still. Smoke curled above shattered stones. Voldemort stood tall, triumphant for the moment, his voice slicing the air as he summoned the survivors. And then, out of the shadows, Draco Malfoy stumbled forward, pale as ash, torn between fear and shame. He walked toward the Dark Lord not as a loyal follower, but as a frightened boy seeking shelter. And Voldemort opened his arms. The embrace that followed was one of the strangest moments in the entire film series. Ralph Fiennes, cloaked in serpentine menace, moves toward Tom Felton's Draco with a slow, rigid shuffle. His arms stretch unnaturally. The smile on his face is tight and wrong. He wraps Draco in what can only be described as a half-hug, half-possession. It's not menacing, it's not fatherly, it's just awkward. Draco's face says everything, his eyes dart. He doesn't lean in, he simply endures it, stiff and confused, as if he too has no idea what's happening. There's no precedent for this behavior in the books. Nowhere does Voldemort show warmth, even in disguise. Rowling describes him as cold, manipulative, and utterly incapable of affection. When Draco hesitates in Half-Blood Prince, Voldemort doesn't hug, he threatens. You are the one who has to do it. This is your moment. That is Voldemort, cold, calculating. The Voldemort in this scene behaves like a parody of himself, and not in a clever way. The gesture feels improvised, possibly unscripted, and it breaks the tension of a crucial moment in the story. Fans didn't forget. The awkward hug went viral within days. It became a meme, a symbol of everything wrong with the film's emotional pacing. At a point when dread should have soaked the air, the audience was stifling giggles. A moment that should have deepened, Voldemort's horror turned him into something laughable, and Draco, poor Draco, was reduced to a prop in one of the most unintentionally comedic scenes of the saga. Number 13, Harry spies on Snape, Philosopher's Stone. Harry tiptoed down the dark stone corridor, heart pounding in his chest. He knew he shouldn't be there. It was late, past curfew, and he was heading straight for the office of Severus Snape, the most feared professor in Hogwarts. Worse still, he wasn't wearing his invisibility cloak, the very cloak his father had left him. The same cloak that had saved him from Filch, Mrs. Norris, and countless other close calls. And yet here he was, sneaking through the castle, entirely exposed. What made this moment so bizarre wasn't just the danger, it was the complete lack of planning. Just hours before, Harry had overheard Snape threatening Professor Quirrell in the Forbidden Forest. "You don't want me as your enemy?" Snape had hissed, and Quirrell had trembled like a leaf. Any sane 11-year-old would have told a teacher, or stayed far away. But Harry? He decided to spy on Snape, alone, in the open, without backup, disguise, or even a decent reason, beyond sheer suspicion. He crept up to Snape's door, pressed his ear against the wood, and froze. Snape was speaking again. "You need to figure out how to get past that three-headed dog." The words made Harry's blood turn cold. So it was true. Snape was after the Philosopher's Stone. In the book, Harry later tells Ron and Hermione, he was trying to find out how to get past Fluffy. But what's never explained is how a first-year thought it was a good idea to snoop on a man like Snape without any kind of protection. If Snape had caught him, the consequences would have been severe, possibly even expulsion. This wasn't bravery, it was recklessness. The same boy who showed quick thinking with a troll and played a Quidditch match like a natural somehow forgot every ounce of caution here. The story frames it as a moment of bold curiosity, but rewatching the scene, it feels more like plot convenience. Harry just wanders into the most dangerous room he can find, hoping for answers with zero preparation. For someone supposedly marked by destiny, he sure left a lot up to luck. Number 14, Hermione erases her parents' memory, Deathly Hallows Part 1. Of all the moments the Harry Potter films tried to elevate for emotional impact, few have sparked as much confusion and quiet dissatisfaction as the scene where Hermione Granger wipes her parents' memories in Deathly Hallows Part 1. It was designed to be a tender farewell, a tragic act of protection from a daughter ready to risk everything for the wizarding world. But beneath the soft light and swelling music, something didn't quite ring true. Not because Hermione's sacrifice lacked depth or sincerity, but because the scene itself clashed with the world's internal logic. Fans didn't cry, they furrowed their brows. The moment itself is almost wordless. Hermione, played by Emma Watson, stands in the living room of her family's suburban home. The camera lingers on framed photographs one by one as she magically erases her image from them. The Grangers' smiling faces remain, but the daughter between them vanishes like mist. When her mother looks up, Hermione is already gone, not just from the room, but from her memory too. A dramatic choice, cinematically elegant. But as the music fades and the audience breathes out, the questions begin. Why this spell? Why now? And more importantly, why haven't we seen it before? In the books, this scene doesn't exist. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Rowling gives us a brief explanation through Hermione's own words. "I've also modified my parents' memories," she tells Harry and Ron. "I've made them believe they're really called Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and that their life's ambition is to move to Australia." There's no heartbreaking erasure of self, no vanishing from family photos, no melancholic visuals. Instead, it's a clean, controlled measure. Hermione alters their memories to protect them, but she leaves the door open for their recovery. That detail matters. What the film does instead is shift the act from a clever magical workaround to a noble sacrifice. And while that might seem like an upgrade, emotional stakes, visual storytelling, the heartbreak of goodbye, it also fundamentally changes what kind of magic Hermione used. In the book, it's clear that memory modification is reversible. It's not destruction, it's a lock on a door. But in the film, what she does seems permanent. The implication is that she erases herself entirely as though she had never existed in their lives, and that leads us down a very confusing path. Because if Hermione is capable of casting such powerful memory magic, wiping her entire presence from the minds of two adults who raised her, why hasn't she or anyone else used this spell before? Why didn't the Order of the Phoenix use it on captured members to prevent Voldemort from extracting information? Why not use it on Death Eaters themselves to erase their knowledge of safe houses, alliances, or even identities? In The Half-Blood Prince, the Ministry spends countless hours trying to keep Muggle officials calm and uninformed. Why not just erase the problematic memories with this same spell? The films give no explanation. We are meant to accept it as a unique emotional moment of magical prowess, but that moment exists in a vacuum. It breaks the rules established by previous films in which memory charms are shown to be unstable and dangerous. Consider Chamber of Secrets, when Gilderoy Lockhart tries to use a memory charm with Ron's broken wand. The result is catastrophic. He erases his own mind. The films themselves already told us memory magic is volatile, risky. Suddenly, Hermione casts an advanced form of it with perfect precision. Not only does it work, but it does so quietly, gently, flawlessly. Why? There is also a narrative contradiction. In Order of the Phoenix, we learn about the spell Obliviate. It's used by the Ministry to modify or erase Muggle memories when they've seen magic. The team from the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes relies on it regularly, but it's shown to be a blunt instrument. When Lockhart uses it, he ends up with amnesia. When the Order must hide their headquarters, they rely on Fidelius charms, not memory wipes. The idea that a teenager could wield such complex spellwork with no apparent consequences feels like a betrayal of the story's own rules. Moreover, the emotional tone of the scene undercuts the broader themes of sacrifice in the series. Throughout the book, sacrifice is about choice, pain, and sometimes the failure to undo what's been done. Think of Lily Potter standing between Voldemort and her baby son, not erasing herself, but confronting death. Think of Dobby's rescue or even Snape's long-term undercover work. These sacrifices come at great personal cost and are felt over time. Hermione's act in the film, while tragic in intention, is oddly clean, emotionless, and disconnected. Her parents never reappear, never remember, never struggle with the loss. It feels staged. There is also the issue of permanence. In the books, Hermione plans to reverse the spell once the war is over. She trusts her own abilities enough to believe that this is not forever. But in the film, the ambiguity is unbearable. Do her parents ever remember her again? Does she track them down after the battle? We never find out. The camera never returns to them, and so the question lingers, was that goodbye truly final? And if it wasn't, why was the scene so final in tone? It also damages Hermione's character in a subtle way. Hermione is defined by her logic, her preparation, her caution. She's the one who memorized Hogwarts, a history. She's the one who carried the tales of Beedle the Bard and planned for every contingency before leaving with Harry and Ron. And yet in this moment she acts with extreme magical precision and emotional detachment, performing a spell of immense magnitude with no help, no testing, and no explanation. It feels like a betrayal of her deeply cautious nature. Number 15, Harry Breaks the Elder Wand, Deathly Hallows Part 2. In the crumbling ruins of the final battle, dust still settling over the smouldering stones of Hogwarts, Harry Potter stood at the edge of a broken world. Around him lay the cost of war, bodies, blood, sorrow, silence. But in his hand was the Elder Wand, an ancient relic that had outlived lifetimes, borne through centuries by hands both noble and cruel. It was no ordinary wand. Crafted by Death himself, as legend says, it was more than wood and core. It was a symbol of power, legacy, and danger. And in a moment of cinematic finality, Harry snapped it in half and let it fall into the abyss. The camera lingered on his face, weary, resolved, free. To a casual viewer, it was a powerful gesture, rejecting temptation, walking away from supremacy. But to readers, to those who followed the books and knew the layered morality of J.K. Rowling's world, it was a moment of dissonance so sharp it fractured the emotional logic of the ending. This wasn't a choice born of wisdom. It was a cinematic simplification, a flattening of character complexity and, worst of all, a betrayal of what Harry stood for. In the books, Harry did something entirely different. After winning the Elder Wand from Draco Malfoy because Draco had disarmed Dumbledore and thus unwittingly claimed the wand's allegiance, Harry made a deliberate, informed decision. He used the wand once to repair his own broken holly and phoenix feather wand. "I think I'll just go down and bury it with Dumbledore again," he said, standing in the headmaster's office, gazing at the wand that had killed so many. "If I die a natural death like Ignotus, its power will be broken, won't it?" That was the logic of the book. Mercy, responsibility, long-term thinking, a conscious attempt to halt the cycle. In contrast, the film strips away all nuance. Without repairing his own wand, without discussing the wand's history or future, Harry simply snaps it and tosses it off a bridge. No character in the series has ever destroyed a wand like this, let alone one of such magnitude. It's as if a knight, after pulling Excalibur from the stone, broke it across his knee and flung it into a ravine. The gesture lacks narrative weight because it lacks thought. It's an act of impulse, not reflection. And for a character defined by moral courage and empathy, it's deeply out of character. This moment matters because the Elder Wand is not just a plot device. It's the culmination of one of the series' most important arcs, the Hallows versus the Horcruxes. Dumbledore himself was obsessed with the Deathly Hallows in his youth, drawn to the idea of mastering death. His failure to wield them wisely led to the death of his sister Ariana. It was a scar he carried into old age, a story he confessed in the final book through his portrait, and in the pages of the Tales of Beedle the Bard. For Harry to then possess the Elder Wand at the story's end is to inherit that struggle. The way he handles it is not just an epilogue, it's a statement about legacy. And the legacy in the film is clumsy. The visual metaphor of breaking the wand is heavy-handed and unsatisfying. It robs the viewer of the chance to reflect on the Hallows' true meaning. The book makes it clear mastery over death isn't about dominance. It's about understanding limits, about letting go. Harry doesn't reject power by destroying it. He rejects power by returning it, by resisting the urge to own it. That's what makes his arc complete. But in the movie, the destruction feels like a shortcut, a rushed moral. It also raises logistical questions. In the film, Harry never fixes his original wand, so what does he use afterward? Is he forced to buy a new wand? The very wand that had chosen him, his connection to Voldemort, his legacy as the boy who lived, is discarded off-screen, its fate never addressed. In the books, when Harry repairs his wand with the Elder Wand and feels it respond again, it is a moment of spiritual closure. His wand had protected him against Voldemort's onslaughts, survived the Triwizard Tournament, and bent the rules of magic itself. It was as much a part of Harry as his scar. Ignoring that bond in the film strips away a layer of emotional truth. There's also the issue of consistency. Throughout the books, wands are treated with reverence. They choose the wizard, they are loyal, they have personalities. The idea of snapping one, especially the most powerful wand ever created, goes against everything we've learned. Even Ron, in Chamber of Secrets, was devastated when his wand broke, despite it being second-hand and faulty. Yet Harry, in the climax of a decade-long journey, simply destroys the greatest wand in existence like a twig. And what of the wand's future? Magic in Rowling's world doesn't die with the object. What if someone retrieved the pieces? What if the core, thestral hair, the rarest of all, survived? Could the wand be reforged? Could its loyalty be twisted? By failing to ensure its peaceful retirement, Harry risks reigniting the very cycle he fought to end. In the book, he chooses to remove it from history. In the film, he merely tosses it into legend, where any scavenger could one day find it. It is also a moment that undermines Dumbledore's trust. In the book, Dumbledore's plan was clear. He wanted Harry to be the final master of the wand, to break its bloody lineage. "You are the true master of death," he tells Harry, not because Harry owns the wand, but because he doesn't need it. That message is subtle, profound, and entirely lost in the film's version. There's no dialogue, no context, no understanding, just a snap. Number 16, Harry's Silence in the Forest, Deathly Hallows Part 2. The forest stood in solemn silence, shrouded in mist and the anticipation of death. The ground was damp beneath Harry's feet, the whisper of leaves overhead sounding like the last breaths of a fading world. In his hand, the resurrection stone slipped between his fingers, conjuring fleeting images of those he had lost: James, Lily, Sirius, Remus, ghosts of love that lingered just long enough to walk with him. But then they vanished, and Harry stepped alone into the clearing where Lord Voldemort awaited. It was here, in this hallowed space of sacrifice, that the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 made one of its gravest missteps. For when Harry Potter faced death, the moment everything had built toward, he said nothing, he stood still, and then he died. It was a silence that spoke not of bravery, but of missed opportunity. In the novel, this scene pulses with quiet heroism. The reader is inside Harry's mind. We feel the rhythm of his heart, the weight of his thoughts. "Does it hurt?" he asks his spectral companions. Dying? His fear is not hidden, but acknowledged, and still he walks forward. There is an understanding between him and death. He is not fearless, he is simply resolved. The book gives voice to this complexity. The film strips it all away. No words, no glance, no defiance. Just a boy in a hoodie, walking into the abyss with lips sealed shut. This is the climax of a decade-long saga, the pinnacle of character growth, the sacrificial hero meeting his destiny. And yet it plays out like a muted rehearsal. The silence, presumably intended to heighten the gravity of the moment, ends up flattening it. When Harry steps into the clearing, he is the culmination of 7 years of trauma, friendship, love, and war. He has earned the right to speak, not just for himself, but for all those who cannot. Instead, he gives us nothing. The air is heavy with suspense, and the viewer waits for a last word, a final breath, a whisper of goodbye. It never comes. This is not merely about dialogue, it is about closure, about honoring the narrative arc of a character who has carried the weight of the world since childhood. In the book, Rowling gives him the interior monologue of a young man coming to terms with mortality. He embraces it not with bravado, but with grace. He thinks of Ginny's lips, of his mother's eyes, of the people he will leave behind. The film gives us none of this. No internal voice, no spoken word. Just a visual echo of a silent death. It is cinematic minimalism at the expense of emotional clarity. And then there is Voldemort. He stands with his followers like a king of shadows, his wand raised, the green light gathering. Even he, in all his cruelty, deserves a reaction. For this is the man who murdered Harry's parents, the tyrant who split his soul, the enemy who has haunted his dreams. That Harry meets him in silence is not noble, it is anticlimactic. A single look, a final word, even a whispered name, Snape, Dumbledore, Mum, would have stitched meaning into this stillness, but the film remains stubbornly quiet. Compare this to other iconic deaths in cinema, moments when heroes confront their fate with raw humanity. Think of William Wallace in Braveheart shouting "Freedom" as the blade descends. Think of Maximus in Gladiator, speaking of his family as he slips into the afterlife. These scenes are etched into memory because they marry pain with purpose. Harry's death, as filmed, lacks that spark. It is a scene that begs for catharsis and delivers a shrug. Even worse, this silence breaks the rhythm of the film's emotional build-up. In the moments leading up to the forest, we are given stirring farewells. Ron and Hermione's tears, Neville's courage, Hagrid's capture. All signs point to a final reckoning filled with meaning. But instead, when the camera finally lingers on Harry, he is still as stone. The music swells, the screen darkens, and it is over. The audience is left in limbo, not grieving, not inspired, just confused. The real tragedy of this scene is how much potential it had. The visual storytelling is there, the misty forest, the tension, the echoing footsteps. Daniel Radcliffe's face holds the weight of a world collapsing, but his silence robs the moment of its humanity. This is not the Harry who once shouted at Dumbledore for withholding truth. Not the Harry who defied Umbridge with fire in his eyes. Not the Harry who, in Order of the Phoenix, cried out in agony at Sirius's death. This is a stranger, mute, passive, diminished. And what makes it all the more frustrating is that the answer is right there in Rowling's prose. He was not afraid. He was not in pain. The thing he had expected, the oncoming oblivion, did not happen. These lines carry weight. They remind us that Harry's journey was never about power, but peace. The film could have captured that essence, even with a whisper, even with a single sentence. But it chose abstraction over emotion, and in doing so it muted the voice of its hero. The impact of this silence ripples into the aftermath. When Harry returns alive but unseen, watching his friends fight and fall, there is no reflection on what he gave, no acknowledgement of what it cost him. Had he spoken in the forest even one line, it would have tethered his return to a deeper emotional foundation. Instead, the film glides past his death like a technicality. He died, yes, but no one remembers what he said, because he said nothing at all. Number 17, Half-Blood Prince, makes no sense. Half-Blood Prince. Of all the mysteries layered within the Harry Potter saga, one was positioned in the 6th film adaptation as a central enigma, the true identity of the Half-Blood Prince. From the opening scenes of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the narrative leans heavily into the intrigue of this title. The Battered Potions textbook, filled with cryptic annotations, spells, and shortcuts, more effective than anything Slughorn had to offer, becomes a silent yet dominant character. "This book is the property of the Half-Blood Prince," reads the handwritten note inside the cover. Who is he? What does he want? Why did he leave such powerful magic in the margins of a student textbook? The film leans into this mystery, only to reveal an anticlimactic and curiously empty truth. The prince is Severus Snape. But the revelation is not illuminating, it is confusing. There's no thematic payoff, no emotional resonance. It simply lands and dissipates. In J.K. Rowling's original book, the reveal is slightly more supported. The Half-Blood Prince, we're told, is a name born from a fusion of Severus's maternal lineage, Eileen Prince, and his father's Muggle status. "I am the Half-Blood Prince," Snape tells Harry during the climactic chase, after casting Sectum Sempra to disarm him. That's it, a statement with no reflection, no explanation, and certainly no philosophical or narrative underpinning. The films take this even further into the realm of the absurd by never contextualizing it. There is no explanation for why Snape would adopt a pseudonym at all, much less one so dramatically inconsistent with his persona. The very idea of a character like Snape, a man defined by bitterness, reserve, and loathing for self-aggrandizement, choosing a grandiose alias like the Half-Blood Prince, is inherently contradictory. What part of Severus Snape, the cold, calculating spy who deceived Voldemort for years, would ever write his spells in a textbook and sign them with a theatrical name. It's not simply a question of internal logic, it's one of character violation. This is the man who, in nearly every scene, detests attention, prides himself on secrecy, and recoils at sentimentality. Why would he elevate his blood status into a title as if flaunting it? For future generations, Snape's hatred of James Potter, his disdain for the Gryffindor crowd, and his immersion in Slytherin bitterness are central to his personality. He is not someone who would want to be discovered, admired, or remembered by a future student, and yet the film frames his half-blood prince identity as a Shakespearean revelation, as if we are witnessing the unmasking of a caped figure. It lands as melodrama, but what it lacks is coherence. There's no sense of why Snape ever took the trouble to brand his personal textbook with that name in the first place. Was it pride? Was it rebellion? The film never says. Even more baffling is Harry's complete lack of curiosity. For 6 films, Harry has questioned everything. He badgered Dumbledore about Voldemort's secrets, pursued answers about the Sorcerer's Stone, the Chamber of Secrets, Sirius Black, the Triwizard Tournament. But when faced with the titular enigma, the identity of the half-blood prince, Harry receives Snape's admission and moves on. There's no confrontation, no pause to ask, why would Snape do that? What did it mean to him? The lack of curiosity makes the entire narrative device feel hollow, a decorative mask placed over an otherwise straightforward arc. The irony is that the film had ample opportunities to explore this identity with depth. Snape's dual heritage, a witch mother and muggle father, mirrors the internal conflict that drives his every decision. He is constantly navigating between worlds, between Voldemort's ideology and Dumbledore's compassion, between his own hatred and his enduring love for Lily Potter. A title like Half-Blood Prince could have become a symbol of this tension, a name carved out of resentment and self-invention. Instead, it's a throwaway line at the end of a dark hallway. In the book, Harry does take a fleeting interest in the name's origin. He finds out that Eileen Prince was a witch and deduces the title's origin. But even this is brief and undeveloped. There's no reflection on why Snape would cling to a title born of a bloodline he seems to detest. We know from the pensieve scenes that Snape loathed his father. Tobias Snape, a muggle, was abusive and neglectful. Snape's embrace of the term half-blood might then be read as either reclaiming his identity or sarcastically branding himself with what he was made to hate. But this complexity is never articulated in the films. It becomes a puzzle piece that doesn't fit anywhere. What makes the scene in the film so jarring is its theatricality. Snape turns to Harry, bathed in firelight, and declares, "I am the half-blood prince." It is framed as a mic drop moment, but there is no weight to it. No prior build-up links Snape emotionally or thematically to the title. It's not a culmination of anything, just a dramatic label hurled into the air. The camera lingers, waiting for an impact that never comes, and then, without any reaction, the story moves on. Imagine a different treatment, one where the nickname served as a psychological clue, a breadcrumb to Snape's fractured self, a lens into how he coped with adolescence, isolation, and rage. Imagine the half-blood prince as a persona, not a title, but a mask Snape wore to survive. Then his scribbled notes, his secret spells, and his shortcuts would read as acts of defiance and desperation. The brilliance of Sectum Sempra, the violence it hides, would become a metaphor for Snape's own wounds. But the films never attempt this. They settle for a twist without a story. This is where the failure truly lies. It's not in the fact of Snape being the prince, but in how little the narrative cares to unpack it. The title of the book, The Half-Blood Prince, suggests a centrality to the story. It is the frame through which we expect to see Snape revealed, his layers peeled back. But when the revelation arrives, it's disconnected from everything that came before, and everything that follows. There is no sense that this was the key to understanding him, no sense that it changed anything. Contrast this with other pseudonyms in the series. Tom Riddle famously anagrams his name into "I am Lord Voldemort," a choice steeped in his rejection of his Muggle father and embrace of a mythic identity. It's egotistical, terrifying, and entirely in character. Riddle's alias is used to manipulate, to dominate. It's tied directly into his philosophy of blood purity and conquest. But Snape's alias, by comparison, is meaningless. It's not used for manipulation. It's not used for pride. It's just there, scribbled in a textbook, unexplored. There is also an emotional disconnect between the title and Snape's story. At no point does Snape refer to himself this way outside the moment of revelation. No one else calls him that. The name is never mentioned again in the films. It serves no purpose other than to shock the viewer. This undercuts the entire mystery built around it. In effective storytelling, reveals are supposed to deepen our understanding of character. This one adds nothing. It merely confuses all. In a series where identity is everything, where characters hide behind masks, pseudonyms, and animagus forms, the missed opportunity here is enormous. Snape, more than any other character, is a study in duality. He is both hero and villain, spy and professor, loyal and bitter. His pseudonym could have been the key to this internal war. Instead, it becomes a trivia fact. Consider how deeply Snape's bitterness runs. He was bullied at school, mocked by the marauders, marginalized for his appearance, his social class, and his interests. A pseudonym like Half-Blood Prince might have been his way of asserting power in a world that denied him any. It might have been the name he whispered to himself in empty corridors. But the film never gives us a glimpse of that boy or the pain that might have birthed such a name. It only gives us a line. Even the term Prince is questionable. It refers to his mother's surname, yes, but it also carries a connotation of nobility. Snape is not a noble figure. He is morally ambiguous, cold, and deeply flawed. What part of him saw himself as royalty? Was it irony? Was it delusion? Was it a bitter commentary on his wasted potential? These questions remain unasked. The film never hints at irony or self-awareness. It presents the name as sincere without the emotional groundwork to justify it. The lack of follow-up is the final nail. After Snape's dramatic declaration, the plot shifts immediately to Dumbledore's funeral. No further mention is made of the prince. Harry never returns to the book. No one investigates the spells. No student wonders who created such magic. It's as if the entire plot thread is discarded, and perhaps it is. In the film's rush toward its conclusion, it forgets the question it asked. In the broader themes of the series, love, identity, sacrifice, the Half-Blood Prince could have been a vehicle to explore all three. Snape's love for Lily, his sacrifice for Dumbledore's cause, his shame and pride tangled in his bloodline. All of this could have been tied into the name. But the film keeps them separate. It presents the Half-Blood Prince not as an answer to a character study, but as a riddle without a key. The disappointment is not in the twist, but in its waste. Snape is arguably the most complex character in the series. His life is filled with sorrow, secrecy, and contradiction. A pseudonym chosen in youth could have been a window into his soul, but when that name finally surfaces, it's treated like an afterthought. It has no echo, no legacy, only a sentence dropped in a corridor and left behind. By making the Half-Blood Prince a meaningless label, the film robs the audience of an emotional truth. It sets up a question that begs for an answer rooted in psychology, pain, or memory, and gives us nothing but flair. What should have been a moment of revelation becomes a moment of confusion, and in a story filled with magic, that might be the most disappointing spell of all. Number 18, Staircase Melodrama with Hermione, Goblet of Fire. Of all the changes the Harry Potter films made, few moments feel as jarringly artificial as the staircase scene between Hermione and Harry in the Goblet of Fire. It is late, the walls of Hogwarts are bathed in shadow, and Hermione Granger sits halfway up a wide stone staircase, her arms wrapped around her knees, eyes shimmering with tears. Harry Potter, the supposed emotional anchor of the series, stands before her like an awkward ghost, barely contributing, his presence as stiff as the banister beside him. What could have been a moment of profound teenage complexity dissolves into a melodramatic monologue, played out like a misplaced soap opera in the middle of a fantasy adventure. Hermione's voice quivers as she declares that someone should have asked me earlier, referring to Ron's failure to invite her to the Yule Ball. This is meant to be her moment of vulnerability, an emotional outpouring that signals her transformation from a bookish girl to a young woman grappling with romantic frustration. But the scene feels forced because the emotional tone doesn't match the characters as we've known them. Hermione is usually composed, firm, and rational. Her intelligence is her strength, yet here she dissolves into tears, not because of trauma or danger, but because a boy didn't ask her to a dance. It cheapens her emotional range, reducing her to a stereotype she never fit in the books. The real dissonance comes not just from Hermione's tearful outburst, but from Harry's muted silence. As she unloads her grief and disappointment, Harry barely reacts. He listens, sure, but his expression never truly shifts, and his lines are minimal to the point of invisibility. The boy who once shouted in rage when Cedric died, who cried alone in the cupboard under the stairs, who defended Sirius with fierce loyalty, stands there like a coat rack, as though empathy had been edited out of his script. The filmmakers needed Harry to be present, but failed to give him any meaningful role beyond standing and blinking. This imbalance distorts the dynamic between them. On screen, Harry and Hermione appear as though they are on the brink of romantic tension. The lighting is soft, the camera lingers too long, and her confession, though meant for Ron, lands in Harry's lap like a misplaced love letter. The film momentarily toys with a romantic angle between the two, something the books never encouraged. In fact, J.K. Rowling was always adamant Harry and Hermione shared a deep, platonic bond. "I never saw them together," she wrote. "It was always Ron and Hermione." And readers understood this. Harry saw Hermione as a sister, someone he trusted, someone who grounded him. But in this scene, that clarity is muddled by unnecessary emotional suggestion. The oddity is heightened by how different this is from the source material. In the book, the emotional fallout from the Yule Ball is handled with subtlety. Hermione doesn't cry on staircases. Instead, she lashes out at Ron with wit and sharpness. "Next time there's a ball, ask me before someone else does, and not as a last resort," she hurls at him, leaving Ron stunned. Her pain is real, but it is dignified. The strength of the moment is in her control of it. She chooses her words, walks away, and leaves an impact. The Hermione of the book doesn't need an emotional crutch. She owns her moment, but the film takes that energy and mutes it into a sobbing teenager seeking validation. This also reveals a strange insecurity in the film's handling of female emotion. Rather than trust that a young woman's anger and confidence can carry a scene, the script rewrites her into someone softer, more fragile, easier to pity. It feels like a disservice to Emma Watson's portrayal, which had always given Hermione depth and resilience. Instead of allowing her to storm away in righteous frustration, she's kept stationary, literally sitting on stairs, confined in a space where she can only cry and hope someone will understand. The strength that Hermione always radiated is suddenly drained away. And what does this do to Harry's character? Instead of being the friend who offers reassurance or honest reaction, he becomes a prop to Hermione's angst. There's no spark of the witty, emotionally savvy boy who comforted Luna Lovegood about her shoes. No trace of the friend who stood up to Ron's jealous streaks or who knew when someone needed a quiet gesture rather than empty words. Here, Harry has been stripped of agency, leaving the viewer with a shell of a protagonist, observing but not participating, and certainly not growing. The staging of the scene contributes to the awkwardness. Staircases, in film language, are transitional spaces. Characters move through them, ascend or descend. To place Hermione here, unmoving and weeping, suggests she's stuck, emotionally and literally. Meanwhile, Harry stands on a different step, not sitting beside her, not matching her physical level, but distantly hovering, creating a visual gap between them. Rather than bring them closer as friends, the staging distances them further. It's not intimacy, it's imbalance. The soundtrack doesn't help. A soft, sentimental musical cue underscores the moment, as though nudging the viewer to feel something unearned. The music swells when Hermione says, "You've got to ask me before someone else does," but the line falls flat because it's directed at Ron, who isn't even there. Why is Harry the emotional receiver of a confession meant for someone else? Why is he tasked with absorbing the consequences of a romantic arc he isn't even part of? This decision also undermines Ron's character arc. In the books, Ron's jealousy and immaturity are key steps in his growth. His fight with Hermione over Victor Krum reveals his unresolved feelings, but the emotional climax belongs to him and Hermione, not Harry. By shifting the emotional weight to a scene with Harry, the film saps the Ron-Hermione dynamic of its potency. It turns what should be a three-sided tension into a lopsided two-person misfire. Moreover, the decision to create romantic ambiguity between Harry and Hermione contradicts the emotional logic of the story. In later films, the platonic nature of their bond becomes central, especially when they dance in the tent during Deathly Hallows. That scene works because it shows two friends comforting each other in despair, not lovers in denial. But this staircase scene in Goblet of Fire adds confusion, making that later moment harder to interpret. Was it always this blurry? Or did the filmmakers simply miscalculate in Goblet of Fire and choose never to correct it? The visual language of the scene contradicts its emotional intent. Hermione's red dress, left over from the ball, makes her appear more like a romantic heroine than a frustrated friend. The lighting is moody, soft, and golden, ideal for confessions of love, not arguments about friendship and emotional betrayal. The composition evokes a romantic drama rather than a magical adventure, and that's the heart of the problem. It doesn't feel like Harry Potter. It feels like something borrowed from another genre, clumsily inserted into a story where it doesn't belong. Viewers unfamiliar with the books might not find this jarring, but for fans of the novels who know the strength of Hermione's character and the foundations of Harry's friendships, the scene is puzzling. It warps their personalities into something unfamiliar. Hermione becomes weepy, Harry becomes mute, and their bond becomes suspiciously ambiguous. It's not a natural evolution of their relationship, it's a misguided detour. The film could have used this moment to reinforce the trio's growing pains without distorting their characters. A scene where Harry gives Hermione real support, sharing his own frustrations with Cho perhaps, could have been honest, mutual, and humanizing. But instead he is silent. She monologues. And the audience is left wondering, what exactly just happened? Was this meant to be sad, romantic, both, neither? The contrast with the book is stark. Rowling's narrative never needed these awkward crutches. She trusted the emotional intelligence of her characters. When Hermione was hurt, she expressed it with fire. When Harry was confused, he asked questions. The books let their friendship breathe through action, through tension, through miscommunication, but always rooted in authenticity. The film takes those same ingredients and turns them into an awkward performance. Even Daniel Radcliffe later admitted in interviews that some of his scenes felt out of place. While he didn't name this one directly, fans often point to it when discussing uncomfortable moments between characters who never had romantic tension in canon. The awkwardness on screen is palpable not just because of the script, but because the actors themselves seem unsure of the emotional trajectory. Scenes like this one reveal the challenges of adaptation. When screenwriters and directors deviate from source material, they walk a fine line between interpretation and distortion. Here, that line is crossed. The staircase moment doesn't just add something new, it erases something essential. The clarity of Harry and Hermione's friendship is lost in translation. What remains is a scene that audiences remember not for its insight, but for its dissonance. It's the moment where the magic falters, where the castle's ancient stones echo, not with enchantment, but with the hollow sounds of a soap opera trying too hard. And while the Goblet of Fire contains many strong moments, this one sits like a crack in the marble, reminding viewers that not all magic survives adaptation. Number 19, Harry and Draco's fistfight, Half-Blood Prince. The bathroom duel between Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince remains one of the most awkward and illogical scenes ever brought to life in the film adaptation of J.K. Rowling's universe. In a world built meticulously on magical logic, dueling rules, and a strict code of conduct around the use of wands and spells, the decision to have two teenage wizards suddenly abandon all magical decorum and start punching each other like common schoolboys feels jarringly misplaced. The visual tone of the scene, two boys grappling, shoving, fists swinging under flickering bathroom lights, might fit a football drama or a coming-of-age series about high school rivalry. But this is Hogwarts. This is a place where wizards settle disputes not through fists, but through the clash of spells, knowledge, and discipline. Harry enters the bathroom with fury and suspicion, believing Draco is up to something sinister, which he is. Draco, cornered, turns to face him. The tension is heavy, brimming with the potential for a dramatic confrontation of words and wands. But what happens next sidesteps the world's own rules. Draco lunges at Harry, not with a curse or a spell, but with bare hands. Harry responds the same way. Suddenly, the wizarding world folds in on itself and gives way to a physical fistfight that feels stripped of magic, stripped of the layered tension that normally comes with wizard duels. It's not an escalation of magic, but a complete dismissal of it. No Expelliarmus. No Stupefy. Just two boys punching and pushing like a playground brawl. Nowhere in the series is physical fighting between trained wizards normalized, especially not between students. Even in the most heated moments, be it James Potter bullying Snape, or Sirius Black being tormented, magic was the tool of cruelty. Spells were how pride, hatred, and revenge were expressed. When Harry attacks Draco with Sectum Sempra, it's horrifying not because it follows a violent brawl, but because it betrays the overwhelming magical power in moments of uncontrolled emotion. That moment is cheapened when the scene leading to it feels so disconnected from the internal laws of the universe. Wizards don't punch each other, that's the whole point. Magic is their means of expression, power, and violence. In the book, the duel plays out very differently. The narrative tone is firmly rooted in the magical. Rowling describes it as a burst of light when Harry casts the unknown curse, and Draco is left bleeding horribly. There is no physical wrestling. There is no exchange of fists. Instead, there is rising tension, unspoken dread, and finally, the release of destructive, magical energy. The book scene preserves the integrity of the world's logic. It reminds the reader of the dangers of using spells one doesn't understand. The film version, however, strips away that build-up by reducing the boys to wrestling teenagers. It becomes a scene that lacks imagination, ironically, in a series that exists entirely on fantasy. It is especially jarring because earlier films took great care to establish how serious wand use is in Hogwarts. When Harry uses the Patronus charm on Dudley and the Dementor in Order of the Phoenix, the Ministry threatens expulsion. When students duel, they do so with wands in clearly structured formats, such as the dueling club in Chamber of Secrets. Even unintentional use of magic, as when Harry inflates Aunt Marge, has legal consequences. So for two students to throw punches in a bathroom with no magical repercussion or even raised eyebrows stretches the internal consistency of the universe. It breaks immersion. It makes the viewer forget for a moment that they are in a school for wizards. The scene is also thematically inconsistent. Harry and Draco have always represented two ideological poles. Their hatred was born not out of childish scuffles but out of deeply rooted social, political and moral differences. Draco was raised to believe in blood purity, to follow Voldemort's path. Harry represents defiance of tyranny, defense of the marginalized. Their confrontations have always been layered with ideology, legacy and pride. Turning such a conflict into a fistfight removes all those nuances. It becomes physical, primal, even petty. Their legacy of enmity is reduced to brute force, ignoring the intellectual and emotional stakes of their rivalry. There's also the matter of magical security and surveillance at Hogwarts. In previous films and books, we learn that the school is tightly controlled in terms of spell usage. The trace exists to monitor underage magic. Professors appear instantly at signs of magical distress, yet in the film's bathroom scene, all that seems forgotten. There is no sense of urgency or magical awareness. Snape arrives late, after the blood is already on the floor. There is no magical alarm, no sensing of forbidden spells. How did the professors miss such a violent outburst of magic, especially when one student uses a cursed spell invented by the half-blood prince? The movie also removes the deeper emotional complexity Harry feels after using Sectum Sempra. In the book, Harry is horrified, overwhelmed by guilt, and spends days haunted by what he did. He didn't know what the curse would do, and when he sees the damage, he feels a profound sense of remorse. The movie skips over much of that internal reaction. Perhaps because the brawl, which precedes the spell, already diminishes the seriousness of what happens, it's hard to see Harry's horror as anything more than a response to a bad outcome rather than a moral awakening. The lack of emotional build-up makes the moment feel hollow. Moreover, the choreography of the scene is simply bizarre. The tight, shaky camera work during the physical fight doesn't add realism, it only adds confusion. It gives the impression that the director wanted to channel a gritty, real-world aesthetic rather than the fantastical, structured world of Hogwarts. Why suddenly shoot it like a teenage soap opera fight? This is not the tone or language the films have previously embraced. The visual style of the scene clashes with everything the audience has come to expect from duels in the Harry Potter universe. Elegant wand movements, flashes of light, clever incantations, and unexpected reversals of fortune. By removing the magical component from the confrontation, the scene also robs Harry of one of his defining traits, his moral hesitation around violence. From early in the series, Harry is shown to avoid cruelty. He resists using unforgivable curses. He prefers defense over attack. Even when provoked, Harry's instincts lean toward magical restraint. Punching Draco feels like a character deviation, an impulsive, uncharacteristic act not supported by his past behavior. It would have made more sense for Harry to angrily pull his wand and perhaps cast a less dangerous spell before accidentally escalating things with Sectum Sempra. Instead, the fists make him seem less like a wizard and more like an angsty teen in a muggle school. Contrast this with earlier magical confrontations, Harry versus Snape, Harry versus Bellatrix, or even Harry against Voldemort. All are defined by magical technique, clever timing, emotional subtext, and power dynamics. The bathroom fight contains none of these elements. It's visceral in the wrong way. It's not frightening or impactful. It's just confusing. There is no moment of magical outmaneuvering, no cleverness, no build-up of suspense, just slaps, grunts, and then suddenly an overpowered curse with no context. From a narrative standpoint, the scene misses the opportunity to show the instability of magic under stress. If the film had emphasized that magic becomes unpredictable when fueled by raw emotion, especially spells from a dark source, it could have elevated the danger and suspense. But instead of exploring the psychological tension of Harry being tempted by dark magic, it opts for a physical clash that feels directionless. There is no lesson, no foreshadowing, just a tonal departure. The duel also could have been an ideal moment to deepen Draco's arc. In the book, Draco's vulnerability in the bathroom scene is critical. He is crying, he is terrified, he is a boy caught in a dark web beyond his control. The fight reveals his inner breakdown, But the film glosses over this. There is no real chance for Draco to express emotion before fists fly. The audience sees a fight, not a character moment. His pain is buried under chaotic punches and bathroom tiles. The result is a loss of dramatic depth. Even Snape's arrival is strangely cold. In the book, he reacts swiftly and with underlying fury. The moment brims with subtext, Snape healing Draco, while grappling with the knowledge that Harry has used one of his own inventions. In the movie, that subtext is diluted. Snape merely plays medic. The emotional weight of the scene deflates. The layers of betrayal and fear are lost. The fight has replaced all of it with noise and blood. The use of sectum sempra should have been a seismic moment for Harry, a shift in his relationship with power, morality, and the dark arts. But without the proper magical build-up, the scene lacks gravity. The audience isn't primed to understand the true horror of the spell because the scene has already ventured into physical absurdity. It feels like the magical consequences are trying to climb out of a non-magical hole, and they never fully reach the emotional resonance they could have had. Throughout the series, Harry's spells have symbolized his growth. From learning Lumos in early books to casting Expecto Patronum, each spell marks an emotional and magical milestone. Sectum Sempra is supposed to be a dark turning point, a reminder of the danger of unchecked power. But the movie undermines this by pairing it with a childish brawl. The emotional maturity of the moment is drowned in bathroom punches. Viewers are left with questions. Why didn't Harry disarm Draco first? Why didn't Draco cast a shield? Why were two students allowed to fight in a bathroom with no magical alert? Why did the film abandon the visual and narrative language it had so carefully developed over 5 films? It's not just inconsistent, it's baffling, and the fact that it leads to one of the darkest moments in the series only makes the misstep more painful. Ultimately, this scene exemplifies what happens when a fantasy universe forgets its own rules. The bathroom duel is not memorable for its intensity or tragedy. It is memorable because it feels wrong. It feels as though the filmmakers chose spectacle over substance, confusion over character, and fists over spells. In a world where wands are everything, this scene dared to ask, what if they just punched each other instead? And the answer, unfortunately, was disappointment. Number 20. Harry's lame disguise at the wedding, Deathly Hallows Part 1. Of all the reckless decisions made during the tumultuous final chapters of the Harry Potter saga, one scene stands out as both baffling and absurd. Harry Potter attending the wedding of Bill Weasley and Fleur Delacour while being the most wanted person in the entire magical world. This is not a minor misstep or a forgettable oversight. It's a scene so glaringly illogical that it begs for scrutiny. After narrowly escaping death during their flight from Privet Drive, where 7 Potters were deployed to throw off Death Eaters, Harry finds himself attending a high-profile social event filled with dozens of guests. No polyjuice potion, no complex disguise, just a feeble spell to alter his face a little, and that's it. It's as if the script forgot that Voldemort had taken over the ministry and placed a price on Harry's head. No matter how emotionally significant the wedding may be, it should never have been allowed under such obvious risks. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, the viewer is meant to feel the weight of final goodbyes and celebrations before the plunge into darkness. The wedding scene is beautifully lit, warmly scored, and full of familiar faces. But beneath the romantic glow lies a disastrous breach of logic. Harry Potter, still clearly Harry Potter to anyone with half a functioning eye or brain, is strolling around the venue. He's not wearing a mask, cloak, hood, or any truly meaningful disguise. He's not even behaving in a way that might deflect suspicion. He doesn't alter his voice, walk, or mannerisms. He's just there. Standing in a crowded tent, sipping pumpkin juice, the lightning-shaped scar hidden under nothing more than a slightly altered nose and some vague facial magic. The absurdity of it all is magnified by the fact that this same movie has already established that the Ministry has developed technology and spells to recognize Harry on sight. The film shows the Ministry actively hunting him. Snatchers are roaming the countryside. Posters of Harry labeled Undesirable Number 1 are everywhere. And yet here is Harry at the wedding behaving as though he's just another guest enjoying the festivities. There is no sign of anxiety in the way he's protected, or rather, not protected. The Order of the Phoenix, who should be among the most cautious and battle-hardened witches and wizards in the world, treat the occasion as though they're back in the good old pre-Voldemort days. It's almost laughable. Remus Lupin, Kingsley Shacklebolt, Arthur and Molly Weasley, all of them somehow think this is a fine idea. None of them object loudly or demand tighter security. It's as if their sense of realism took a vacation. Even Hermione, the ever-practical genius who never lets a detail slip by, seems unusually lax about this setup. This is the same Hermione who packed an entire tent into her beaded bag for the sake of survival, who memorized the laws of Wizarding Society, who obliviated her parents for their own protection. And yet she agrees to attend this wedding with Harry barely disguised, in full view of friends, family, and potential Ministry informants. The contrast between her usual caution and this decision is so sharp it's almost jarring. It makes the audience wonder whether the emotional weight of the scene was prioritized so heavily that logic was thrown out the window. The book itself, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, offers slightly more grounding than the film, yet even there, the logic is fragile. Harry is disguised using a spell described as a stinging jinx to swell his face beyond recognition, according to the text. However, the discomfort of the spell is apparent, and the effect is far from foolproof. He caught sight of his own reflection in the mirror on the wall and was deeply shocked by the swelling and bruising that made him unrecognizable. It might work at a distance, perhaps. In the street, but among guests, friends, and acquaintances. It's laughably insufficient, especially considering that many attendees are close to the Order and would be well aware of the danger Harry is in should anyone get wind of his presence. What makes the scene even more implausible is that it takes place in a large gathering, something that any strategist or military planner would warn against in times of war. The wedding of Bill and Fleur was bound to be a significant affair, involving members from the Delacour family in France and the entire Weasley clan, not to mention guests from Hogwarts and the Order. The guest list is extensive and includes people who may not have the highest level of security clearance or trust. How the Order didn't see this as a serious security breach is beyond comprehension. After all, in the very same book, Rufus Scrimgeour visits the Burrow under heavy Ministry surveillance. How difficult would it have been for a spy to show up at the wedding in disguise? There's also the sheer audacity of trusting that no one among the guests would talk. Harry is wearing a face-swelling jinx, sure, but his hair, voice, and behavior remain the same. He is still the same lanky, glasses-wearing boy with the exact same friends hanging around Ron and Hermione the whole time. Any guest with a functioning brain and eyes could have pieced together the truth, and the stakes are enormous. If discovered, Harry wouldn't just be taken away. The entire wedding would become a bloodbath. Death Eaters would arrive, people would die, and all of it for what? A few hours of normalcy, a celebration that could have waited. Indeed, the outcome validates the worst fears. The wedding is attacked, the Ministry falls. Kingsley's Patronus arrives mid-wedding to declare, the Ministry has fallen, Scrimgeour is dead, they are coming. Panic ensues, people scream, guests scatter, chaos erupts in what feels like a devastating violation of sacred space. The juxtaposition is tragic but also revealing. The very thing that critics feared comes to pass. The danger was real, the threat was imminent, and the wedding was an open invitation for disaster. Had Harry been properly hidden, or better yet, not present at all, the attack may not have been as violent or as swift. The inconsistency of the logic in this scene is especially puzzling. because the rest of the series often takes great pains to emphasize security, secrecy, and planning. From the elaborate measures taken to protect the Sorcerer's Stone, to the use of Polyjuice Potion in the Chamber of Secrets, to the concealment of Grimmauld Place via the Fidelius Charm, the wizarding world clearly has both the tools and the knowledge to hide individuals effectively. Yet for this scene, all of that is cast aside. Instead of using proven magical protections, Harry walks into the lion's den with only a swollen face and blind hope. It also breaks continuity within the very same film. Consider the earlier sequence with the 7 Potters. That elaborate ruse required multiple adult wizards to transform into Harry using Polyjuice Potion, then fly across the country while being pursued by Death Eaters. The risks were acknowledged, the precautions were exhaustive, the escape was costly, Mad-Eye Moody was killed, and George Weasley was gravely injured. That level of paranoia and security vanishes at the wedding as though none of those sacrifices mattered. Why go through the trouble of such an elaborate plan only to throw caution to the wind days later? It's particularly troubling that no one in the Order steps in to say no. These are people who have lived through the First Wizarding War, who have seen Voldemort's reach and cruelty. Moody, though dead by this point, would have rolled in his grave. Kingsley, a former Auror, should have known better. Molly Weasley, the ultimate protective mother, ought to have shut it all down at the first whiff of risk. But the script requires a celebration, and so logic is sacrificed on the altar of narrative momentum. The result is a moment that leaves thoughtful viewers shaking their heads. In a world so preoccupied with the mechanics of identity, where wands are linked to their owners, where blood status can determine your fate, and where names have literal magical weight, this lackluster disguise feels not just unrealistic, but offensively lazy. The magic system in Rowling's universe has always been nuanced and strict, often punishing those who cut corners. Yet here, the hero is allowed to cut all the corners, endangering not only himself but everyone around him. Another jarring detail is that Harry is not even taking his surroundings seriously. He is relaxed, chatting with guests, and clearly not on high alert. He listens to speeches, watches the dances, and partakes in the merriment. This is not the behavior of a hunted fugitive. It's the behavior of someone who has momentarily forgotten he's being hunted. In the book, Harry at least shows signs of discomfort, feeling the eyes of others on him and worrying about being recognized. The movie strips even that away, painting a picture that borders on negligence. The filmmakers may have wanted to include the wedding for emotional payoff and thematic richness. It's a moment of unity, love, and family before the storm. That's understandable, but there were countless ways to include the scene while maintaining plausibility. Harry could have stayed in a magically protected room nearby. He could have used Polyjuice Potion. He could have simply not been there at all, and the trio could have watched the celebration from afar, feeling the loss of normal life. Instead, we are asked to accept that the most hunted boy in the world walked into a tent full of people with barely a disguise and hoped for the best. The wedding attack serves as a narrative wake-up call, pushing the trio into the wilderness and igniting the real quest for the Horcruxes. But even that doesn't justify the recklessness. This is not the desperate move of someone with no choice. It is the careless blunder of characters who should have known better. It's not just the risk to Harry, it's the risk to everyone in attendance. Each guest becomes collateral in a war they didn't choose to join. Each face becomes a potential casualty. The irresponsibility is staggering. Some might argue that love must triumph over fear, that this moment is meant to show that joy can exist even in dark times. But bravery does not require blindness. Courage and caution are not mutually exclusive. In this case, the brave thing would have been to stay away, to let Bill and Fleur have their day without making them a target, to trust that love endures even from a distance. Instead, the choice made was to gamble with lives and lose. Number 21, Glass Overload at the Ministry, Order of the Phoenix. The battle in the Department of Mysteries was meant to be terrifying. It was meant to be the moment when Harry Potter, still so young, saw war truly begin. The book painted this transformation in grim, sharp brushstrokes, darkness pierced by curses, children thrown into chaos, and the cold, echoing silence of the ministry broken by the violence of forbidden spells. But the film? The film chose another path. It gave us a swirling ballet of shadows and lights, floating glass, and inexplicable architecture that felt more like a fashionably grim art museum than the cold, bureaucratic heart of a secret government. In the book, the Department of Mysteries was a place of terrible wonder. Black doors, whispering walls, rooms that defied logic. The time room with its sparkling bell jar. The brain room full of tanks and pulsing minds. The death chamber with its haunting stone arch and the veil that moved without wind. But in the film, all this was reduced to a giant monochromatic stage where figures blurred into one another, shouting curses without precision, like children with sparklers on New Year's Eve. What was once a labyrinth of existential horror had been transformed into a foggy showroom of CGI smoke. And then there was the glass. So much glass. Shards floated through the air like rose petals at a wedding. When Lucius Malfoy emerged from the darkness, his silver mask gleaming under flickering light, he was surrounded by towering structures that looked like translucent sculptures from a gallery no wizard had asked for. Where did they come from? What was their purpose? Were they meant to be containers, weapons? Was this an exhibit on magical fragility? The film offered no answer. The set design overwhelmed the senses but starved the mind. In Rowling's text, the battle begins with a terrifying truth. The children have been tricked. The prophecy was a lure. Harry leads Ron, Hermione, Neville, Luna, and Ginny into danger, believing Sirius is in mortal peril. The tension is earned, layered, but in the film, that emotional architecture collapses into confusion. The battle bursts out suddenly. Death Eaters and children appear and disappear like ghosts in a fog. The viewer is left squinting through plumes of black smoke, trying to make sense of who is casting what. There is no clear geography. The space, instead of being terrifying in its logic-defying nature, becomes flat and abstract. One must remember what makes magical duels so compelling in the books. Magic in Rowling's universe is not arbitrary. It has rules. It has form. Expelliarmus, Stupefy, Protego. Each spell does something specific, and the skilled wizard selects spells with strategy. But in the movie version of the Ministry battle, wands become laser pointers. There's no incantation, no precision, no tactics. It's all flashing lights, streaks of smoke and elegant flourishes. The actors wave their wands like conductors at a symphony of fog, but there is no music. Why did the filmmakers decide to remove all verbal spells from the scene? Why did they assume silence would add gravity when it instead removed all clarity? In the book, we read lines like, Luna had darted past Malfoy's spell and hit him with a reductor curse that sent him flying into a desk. These moments give texture, they show choice. Luna chose a specific spell. She aimed, she hit. In the film, characters flick their wands and hope for the best. There is no sense of intent, only motion. And strategy? Absent entirely. Wizards, some of the most powerful minds in the magical world, run in circles. The children split up for no reason. The Order of the Phoenix arrives and immediately joins the dance of light and smoke. There is no formation, no protection, no attempts to shield the injured. Where is Kingsley Shacklebolt's renowned tactical brilliance? Where is Mad-Eye Moody's paranoid caution? Even Dumbledore, when he finally arrives, is reduced to a gladiator in a stylized duel with Voldemort, a fight that, while visually striking, forgets that these men were meant to be chess masters, not fencers. The film transforms the most tragic moment of the book into an aesthetic exercise. In the novel, Sirius Black's death is cruel and sudden. He taunts Bellatrix, she fires the curse, and he falls through the veil. He was laughing at her, and he fell through the archway and disappeared behind the veil, which fluttered for a moment as though in a high wind, and then fell back into place. That quiet horror, the realization that death had happened in a heartbeat, is haunting. The book lingers in the silence, but the movie chooses a slow-motion spectacle. Sirius is hit, turns to the camera, and floats backward as though gravity has paused. His body drifts into the veil like a martyr in a dream sequence. It is not painful, it is poetic, but the pain was the point. The veil itself in the book is a mystery. Children hear whispers from it. It unsettles them. Hermione avoids it. Luna is drawn to it. It feels ancient, alive. In the movie, it is just a fluttering curtain in the middle of a ringed stone room, barely explored. No time is given to its implications. No tension is built. The set is striking, yes, with its dark symmetry, but it fails to invite curiosity. It is meant to be a place of unspeakable truths, and yet it becomes just another backdrop. The choice to emphasize visual elements over narrative depth robs the scene of consequence. When Sirius dies, Harry's scream is muted. The film slows time, plays soft music, and lets us watch his grief like spectators in a gallery. But in the book, Harry screams, he fights, he chases Bellatrix down. He is consumed with rage. "I killed Sirius Black," Bellatrix shrieks, and Harry tries to curse her into oblivion. He wants her to hurt. He wants revenge. That fury is part of his coming of age. It is raw. It is unfiltered. But the film exchanges that human reaction for a frozen gasp and a puff of CGI light. Even the arrival of Dumbledore in the book has weight. He appears suddenly without fanfare, his presence a shock to both reader and villain. He seizes control instantly. He binds, protects, and confronts with precision. Dumbledore had most of the Death Eaters grouped in the middle of the room, immobilized by ropes conjured from thin air. In the film, his arrival is theatrical. He bursts into the chaos with grandeur, his duel with Voldemort staged like an elemental battle between fire and water. The scene becomes about style, not stakes. The transformation of the battle into an abstract spectacle also changes how we perceive the characters. In the book, Neville fights with a broken nose and trembling hands, still casting spells. Ron is confused by the brains that ensnare him. Hermione is knocked unconscious. These are young people, terrified but trying. Their mistakes make them real, but in the film, they are little more than shadows, flickering in the periphery. Their pain is not explored. Their bravery is not acknowledged. They become props in the light show. And what of the Death Eaters? In the book, they are cruel, confident, and cold. Lucius manipulates, Bellatrix mocks, Dolohov curses with precision, but the film reduces them to silhouettes in silver masks. They drift in and out of the smoke, casting spells that have no meaning. They are not threats, they are set dressing. When Bellatrix kills Sirius, we don't feel her madness. When Lucius is defeated, we don't understand how. The choreography consumes the characters. There is something disorienting in how the film forgets the rules of its own world. Rowling spent pages teaching readers how magic worked. The importance of non-verbal spells was not introduced until Half-Blood Prince. But here, in Order of the Phoenix, the film jumps ahead. Everyone is suddenly silent, fluent in advanced magic. But this isn't a story choice, it's an aesthetic one. It looks cleaner, it saves time, but it contradicts the logic we were given for 4 films and 5 books. Magic, when stripped of its logic, becomes meaningless. Without rules, it is not wonder, it is noise. In the Ministry battle, the filmmakers chose noise. They chose to layer fog, shatter glass, and swirl shadows, but they forgot to let us feel fear or grief or strategy. They forgot to show us what it means when children walk into war. They gave us a painting of a battle, not the battle itself. The book made that battle count. It changed Harry. It broke him. "There's no need to call me Sir Professor," he tells Snape later. He is bitter. He is angry. He is no longer a boy. But the film skips over that transformation. The death of Sirius, filtered through visual poetry, fails to scar. The viewer sees light, not loss. And still that glass lingers. It hangs in the air, glittering, distracting. Perhaps it was meant to symbolize the fragility of prophecy or the shattering of innocence, but symbolism only works when rooted in logic. In this case, the glass means nothing. It is just there, pretty, pointless, hollow, like the battle itself. The Ministry of Magic should have been a place of dread, a place where the machinery of the wizarding world hid terrible secrets, but the film turned it into an art installation. Magic became mood lighting, death became choreography, and the war, so real in the book, became performance. When everything glows, nothing burns. The tragedy is not just that the scene is illogical, it is that it is forgettable. For all its beauty, the film's ministry battle leaves no scars. It dazzles, then fades. The book stays with you, not because it was pretty, but because it hurt. Number 22. The Epilogue, 19 years later. Deathly Hallows Part 2. Of all the grand cinematic finales fans could have imagined for the Harry Potter saga, few could have predicted that the last scene, the moment meant to stir tears and give closure, would become a long-standing internet meme. When Deathly Hallows Part 2 ended with the epilogue 19 years later, many expected something emotionally profound, a tender farewell to characters who had grown alongside them for a decade. Instead, they were greeted with an awkward, overstaged performance that felt less like a heartwarming send-off and more like a school play featuring adults unconvincingly pretending to be even older adults. The gravity of J.K. Rowling's written ending was lost somewhere beneath overworked prosthetics, synthetic wigs, and a jarring lack of emotional payoff. What could have been a powerful conclusion turned into an unintended comedy sketch. In the book, Rowling's epilogue was restrained yet deeply affecting. It described Harry watching his second son, Albus Severus, board the Hogwarts Express for the first time, passing the torch to a new generation. There was no melodrama, no over-explaining, just a quiet sense of time's passage and the enduring warmth of familial love. The scar had not pained Harry for 19 years. All was well, though. Final line read, and it resonated. The moment was simple, but it glowed with the power of resolution. On screen, however, that same scene buckled under layers of forced sentimentality and unconvincing aesthetics. It lacked subtlety, and in doing so, it robbed viewers of the emotional release they had been promised. Nowhere is this more evident than in the strange visual choices made to age the trio. Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson, all still in their early 20s at the time, were slathered with aging makeup and outfitted in stiff, uninspired wardrobes that did little to sell the passage of nearly 2 decades. Radcliffe's Harry resembled a sleep-deprived accountant on his morning commute. Grint's Ron had the demeanour of a suburban dad, 1 pint too many into a family barbecue, and Watson's Hermione, who should have retained some measure of elegance and authority, looked like she had wandered off from a PTA meeting. None of them radiated the maturity or peace their characters had earned through war, loss, and triumph. The worst offence, however, lay in Bonnie Wright's portrayal of Ginny Weasley. In the books, Ginny was strong, independent, and vibrant. She grew into a formidable witch and a loving mother. But in the film's epilogue, she resembled a high school chemistry teacher whose only purpose was to nod at Harry and look solemn. Her visual styling aged her in a way that was both inconsistent and disheartening. Her expression lacked the spark that once made her a compelling match for Harry. She was there, but barely present, like a cardboard cutout placed for continuity. It was hard to believe this woman had shared in the same war that forged the others. There was a stiffness to everything, the posture, the lines, the expressions. It didn't feel like time had passed organically, but that someone had yelled, "Now act older," right before the camera rolled. The children, though earnest, were given little room to breathe, and their parents loomed like awkward spectators. Instead of witnessing the gentle handover of legacy, we watched a group of exhausted co-workers participating in an obligatory farewell ceremony. The emotional beats were hit like checklist items, not heartfelt moments. This wasn't a reunion, it was a photo op. In Rowling's version, there's warmth in Harry's gentle reassurance to his son, Albus. The book states, "Albus Severus, you were named for 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was the bravest man I ever knew." The line is packed with history, emotion, and a message of acceptance. Yet in the film, that moment felt hollow. Daniel Radcliffe's delivery was competent but strained, as though he were reading a Hallmark card rather than addressing his child. The intimacy between father and son, a cornerstone of the epilogue's impact, was lost amid the sterile set and flat performances. The Hogwarts Express, meant to evoke nostalgia, instead sat awkwardly in the background like an unconvincing prop. The station, King's Cross, looked more like a movie set than a living, breathing place. The entire scene felt curated, as if someone had recreated a Pinterest board of wholesome goodbyes without understanding what made the original moment special. Even the lighting was off, too clean, too polished. There was no emotional shadow, no complexity. It all looked like a dream sequence gone wrong. One of the greatest tragedies of this scene lies in its failure to deliver catharsis. After 8 films of trauma, friendship, and growing up, the audience needed closure. Not just in narrative, but in tone and emotion. They had seen Harry lose nearly every parental figure, had witnessed Ron's growth from comic relief to a true hero, had watched Hermione carry the weight of intelligence and loyalty. And yet in this final scene, they were offered caricatures. Instead of feeling moved, viewers felt disconnected, betrayed even by the sudden shallowness of a world that had always been so rich. The epilogue could have been a moment of grace, a whisper rather than a shout. The film could have chosen to underplay the makeup and instead relied on the actor's natural talents to convey age through posture, tone, and expression. It could have drawn emotional strength from its silences, its pauses, its subtle cues, but instead it opted for theatricality, and that choice stripped it of sincerity. When Harry looked at his son, we should have seen decades of pain, love, and healing in his eyes. What we got was a tired stare under bad prosthetics. Even the score, usually a strength of the series, felt misplaced. The music swelled not with gentle resolution, but with a kind of saccharine finality that did not match the scene's emotional reality. It sounded like a farewell, yes, but not one that had been earned. It was the kind of music that tells the audience what to feel, because the story failed to show it. The auditory manipulation made the scene feel even more artificial, as though the film itself didn't trust its images to carry the moment. It didn't help that the scene was preceded by one of the most emotionally intense sequences in the entire saga. Harry walking through the Forbidden Forest to meet death, the resurrection stone revealing his parents, Sirius and Lupin. That moment was earned, profound, and deeply human. To go from such raw beauty to a jarring, clumsy epilogue was to fall from a mountaintop into a padded room. The tonal whiplash was too much. It undermined what had just been accomplished. This awkward finale also failed to reflect how far the characters had come psychologically. Harry, who once screamed into the night for Sirius, who wrestled with his own darkness, seemed oddly flat. Ron, who had matured into a loyal, battle-hardened man, reverted into a sitcom dad. Hermione, who once stood alone against injustice, looked like she had traded her wand for a grocery list. None of them spoke or moved like people who had survived a war. The weight of the past was gone, replaced by shallow domesticity. Fans who had read the books understood the power of subtle moments. They didn't need tears to fall or voices to break. In the written epilogue, there is peace, not because everything is perfect, but because these characters have earned rest. He hoped his sons would never know such hardships, Rowling writes. It's a line that speaks volumes. The film's version reduced that sentiment to a literal, almost clinical scene. It was safe, sanitized, and deeply forgettable. some of the blame must fall on direction. David Yates, who helmed the final films, had proven capable of great subtlety before, but here he seemed unsure whether to lean into fantasy, nostalgia, or realism. The result was a strange hybrid that felt like none of the above. It was as though the production team knew they had to include the epilogue but didn't quite believe in it. That uncertainty bled into every frame. When filmmakers lose faith in the material, the audience feels it. For all its flaws, the scene might have still worked had the acting been allowed to shine naturally. Radcliffe had shown real emotional range throughout the series, especially in moments of grief and courage. Grint had found surprising depth in quieter scenes. Watson was always excellent at conveying restrained emotion, but the film pinned them down with makeup, direction, and clunky dialogue. The actors were not aged, they were stifled, and the result was a performance that looked like a parody of adulthood. This is not to say the epilogue should have been removed. On the contrary, its inclusion was important. It reminded viewers that life goes on, that even those who fight darkness deserve peace. But it should have been handled with the same delicacy that Rowling used in the final pages. The film tried to deliver closure with visual tricks when it should have trusted its story. The series that once gave us the mirror of Erised, the quiet bravery of Neville Longbottom, the dignity of Snape's final moments, this same series closed its curtain on a stiff, poorly lit train station. It's almost tragic that such a rich narrative ended on such a flat note, because the story deserved better, the audience deserved better, and the characters, after all they endured, deserved to be seen not just as older, but as fuller, wiser, more complete versions of themselves. Instead, we watched shadows in bad suits wave at children and deliver clumsy lines. The memory of war, of sacrifice, of love hard-earned, it was all buried under a mound of latex and awkward silence. And in that final moment, instead of reaching for tissues, the audience reached for their phones to take screenshots, to share memes, to laugh at what should have been sacred, not because they didn't care, but because the film gave them nothing else to hold on to. The final chapter of a cinematic phenomenon ended not with a whisper or a bang, but with a confused shrug. All was well, the screen said, but we were no longer convinced. Number 23, chilly welcome at the Leaky Cauldron, prisoner of Azkaban. On a rainy London night, the windows of the Leaky Cauldron glowed faintly, casting warm light on the cobbled street outside. Inside, shadows flickered across ancient wooden beams, the scent of butterbeer hung in the air, and a gentle murmur of conversation echoed from behind closed doors. But amidst this cosy atmosphere, something felt profoundly off, not in the setting, but in the logic of the story itself. Harry Potter, only 13 years old, had just run away from home, committed underage magic, and yet instead of punishment or even concern, he was welcomed like a guest of honor. This scene, nestled quietly in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, presents one of the most illogical and awkward narrative turns in the film series, a baffling cold reception wrapped in warm hospitality. Harry had just inflated his Aunt Marge, an uncontrolled burst of magic fueled by fury and humiliation. According to the laws established in the wizarding world, specifically the decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery, such magic outside of school is strictly forbidden. We were reminded of this harshly in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, when Harry merely used a hover charm, or so the Ministry thought, and was threatened with expulsion. "Any more magic," said the letter ominously, "and you will be expelled from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." The rules were clear and the consequences harsher. So why then in the third film is there no reprimand, no letter of warning, no official process of accountability? Instead, Harry is whisked away to a warm inn with a hearty meal and a feather bed, while Cornelius Fudge, the Minister for Magic himself, offers nothing but gentle concern and a steaming cup of tea. It is not just a lapse in tone. It's a complete narrative betrayal. The Ministry, as shown in previous and future installments, is obsessed with order, regulation, and public image. The notion that the minister himself would personally escort a boy who had broken a law that they've enforced before, and then not even mention punishment feels like a glaring oversight. It undermines not only the consistency of the magical world, but also the authority and credibility of its institutions. Fudge's demeanour is almost comical in its leniency. He doesn't question Harry's motives, doesn't scold or warn. He simply says, "We don't send people to Azkaban for blowing up their aunts." But no one was talking about Azkaban. What about basic consequences? What about rules? And then there's the matter of Harry living alone in the Leaky Cauldron, a 13-year-old boy, unsupervised, unguarded, and seemingly without any adult supervision, save for a room key and a few coins. This detail might seem quaint, even charming at first glance, but take a closer look and it becomes absurd. Who allowed this? Where is Professor McGonagall? Where is Dumbledore? Who signs off on a young boy staying in a magical pub where any number of dark witches or wizards might wander in? The Harry Potter universe is filled with adult figures who claim to care for Harry. And yet not one of them thought it odd that he'd be left alone in a room over a bar, flipping through spellbooks and eating shepherd's pie. What's worse is that this strange arrangement is never questioned by anyone. The staff at the Leaky Cauldron are friendly, yes, but utterly indifferent to the implications. Tom the innkeeper simply hands Harry the room key and treats him like a long-term tenant. No one asks about guardianship, safety, or schooling. This is a world where minors are tightly controlled, where Hogsmeade visits require parental signatures, and where broomsticks are confiscated for lesser offences. And yet this same world sees nothing unusual about a child living alone above a bar for weeks. The scene becomes even more illogical when placed in the context of the rising threat of Sirius Black. At this point in the narrative, the wizarding world is on high alert. The daily newspapers scream of Black's escape from Azkaban, and ministry officials are allegedly scrambling to protect key targets. Harry, who is arguably the most important child in the magical world, is known to be a possible target, and still no one is guarding him. Fudge mentions Black, yes, but he doesn't order protection, assign a minder, or even insist Harry stay somewhere more secure. He lets the boy who lived sleep alone, unguarded, in a building with a front door that anyone can walk through. Even if we assume that the filmmakers wanted to grant Harry a sense of independence, there are more believable ways to do it. The books themselves offer a better solution. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Rowling does acknowledge the severity of Harry's actions and the Ministry's typical behaviour. Fudge is indeed lenient, but the book takes care to show that it is an exception, and one based on fear. "We don't want to lose you, Harry," Fudge says. "Not now." The implication is clear. The Ministry knows Black is after Harry, and bending the rules is the only way to keep him close and protected. But this nuance is lost entirely in the film adaptation. There, Fudge's actions seem not just lax, but clueless. And that's the core of the problem. The film forgets the world it built. It discards its own laws, institutions, and character motivations for the sake of narrative convenience. The emotional effect may still land. The viewer feels relief that Harry is safe, perhaps even warmed by the cozy visuals. But the story logic has completely unraveled. In a saga known for its intricate world-building and carefully laid rules, this lapse is not just awkward, it's jarring. The scene's awkwardness deepens when we remember how harshly Harry is treated in later films. In Order of the Phoenix, the same ministry that now offers him cocoa and kind words will orchestrate a full-on campaign against him. They will accuse him of lying, bring him to trial for defending himself against Dementors, and treat him as a dangerous, delusional child. This future behavior only highlights how out of character Fudge's kindness was in Azkaban. The inconsistency undermines the complexity of the ministry as an institution and reduces Fudge to a plot device, changing his demeanor to suit the needs of the story at the moment. Moreover, the scene does a disservice to Harry's emotional arc. He has just suffered another traumatic episode with the Dursleys. He has run away from home, not something to be taken lightly. A more logical and emotionally resonant approach would have involved some reckoning with that decision, but instead of being forced to confront the consequences or even reflect on his choices, Harry is rewarded. It breaks the natural rhythm of his growth. A moment that should have been pivotal becomes a narrative shrug. The setting of the Leaky Cauldron also suffers from this confusion. Once depicted as a bustling gateway between the Muggle and magical worlds, it now becomes a strange holding pen for a runaway child. Its potential for danger or mystery is ignored. We do not see shady characters whispering in corners, no ominous figures casting glances toward Harry. It is safe, too safe, to the point of sterility. All tension vanishes. What could have been a tense transition, Harry, alone, fearful, and unsure of what comes next, becomes an oddly cheerful detour, like a holiday stop on the way to real trouble. It's hard not to see the missed opportunities here. Imagine a version of the scene where Harry is forced to reckon with what he's done, where Fudge, rather than coddling him, offers a cold reminder of the rules, but bends them only because the situation is dire, where Harry's stay at the Leaky Cauldron is depicted with unease, an eerie calm before the storm. That version would have stayed true to the world's tone. It would have respected the character's emotional journey and the story's internal logic. Instead, we are left with an emotional contradiction. The audience is told Harry is in danger, and yet every adult behaves as if nothing is wrong. The effect is surreal, like watching a horror film where none of the characters notice the monster lurking in the corner. Fudge's behavior becomes less a character trait and more a sign that the script has forgotten its own stakes. What's perhaps most frustrating is that this inconsistency is never addressed. It hangs there, unresolved, like a plot hole that no one bothered to fill. For a story that prides itself on layering meaning, on tying past and future threads into intricate knots, this feels like a dropped stitch. It teaches the audience to stop trusting the world's rules, because if they can be broken so easily here, what's to stop them from being broken elsewhere? The cold reception Harry receives isn't in the form of scolding or punishment. It's in the form of apathy. No one cares that he ran away. No one investigates why. No one considers that perhaps he needs help, not just a place to sleep. And that ultimately is what makes the scene feel so hollow. It's not just a lapse in logic. It's a missed opportunity for compassion, for realism, for storytelling with depth. This moment should have been a turning point. Instead, it becomes a cinematic shrug. The tension that could have driven the plot forward is diffused. The emotions that could have deepened our connection to Harry are wasted. The rules that could have raised the stakes are ignored. And for a series that so often thrives on structure, on laws both magical and moral, this sudden breakdown in order feels not just illogical, but unearned. It's a reminder that even the strongest narratives can falter if they forget the very world they've built. Number 24, Reparo for glasses but not for wands, Chamber of Secrets. Harry stumbled out of the battered turquoise Ford Anglia, heart racing, his hands trembling as he fumbled for his glasses. They'd barely survived the violent landing, careening into the Whomping Willow with the fury of a tornado. Ripped luggage, a shattered wand, and the bruises decorating Ron's face were stark reminders that this arrival to Hogwarts was nothing short of disastrous. The magical car belched one last insult, ejecting them with mechanical spite before vanishing into the forbidden forest. Among the mess, Harry's glasses lay cracked and bent, rendering the world into a blur of indistinct shapes and flickering shadows. And yet a few minutes later, in a scene that flickered past almost as an afterthought, Hermione Granger steps in, mutters, "Oculus reparo," and the problem is solved. Vision restored. All is well. Or is it? The moment comes so swiftly, nestled within the flurry of the second film, the Chamber of Secrets. that it almost escapes scrutiny. The spell is efficient, elegant in its simplicity, and delivered with Hermione's trademark precision. But for all its polish, the scene leaves behind an aftertaste of contradiction. Not merely a contradiction of plot, but one that chips away at the logical foundation of the magical world J.K. Rowling so carefully constructed. For while the spell does its job and makes the scene flow, it simultaneously invites a cascade of troubling questions. Why, for instance, is it acceptable for a student to casually cast magic on the train platform only a year after Harry was threatened with expulsion for a similar transgression? In The Sorcerer's Stone, it is made explicit underage wizards are not allowed to use magic outside school. The letter Harry receives from the Ministry after Dobby's antics with the pudding makes it clear that violations are tracked and punished. Yet here stands Hermione, wand out, spellcast, and no Ministry owl comes screeching through the compartment. No reprimand, no consequence. A small infraction perhaps, but the inconsistency gnaws at the viewer's sense of coherence, and then comes the larger absurdity. While Hermione's spell delicately repairs the thin frame of Harry's glasses, Ron's wand, splintered and sparking wildly from the same incident, remains broken. Not just broken, but dangerously defective. Throughout the film, its malfunctions are played for laughs and tension, backfiring curses, unexpected explosions, and, in one harrowing moment, nearly turning Ron into a slug fountain. It is, narratively, a ticking magical time bomb, and yet no one, not even Hermione with her encyclopedic knowledge of spells, ever suggests attempting a repair. It's not just an oversight, it's a glaring inconsistency in the internal logic of the magical world. If reparo can fix fragile glass with precision, why not a wand? The books themselves never explicitly forbid the repairing of wands. Instead, we are told through Ollivander in The Deathly Hallows that the wand chooses the wizard, and that the bond between a wizard and their wand is a deeply personal and somewhat mystical connection. But even this spiritual resonance doesn't quite explain why a damaged wand, a tool of such central importance, couldn't be mended by the same magic used to fix glasses or torn robes. Moreover, the fact that the broken wand becomes a recurring gag throughout the Chamber of Secrets underlines how this plot hole is used for comedic effect rather than meaningful world-building. Ron's misfires are chuckle-worthy, certainly, but they culminate in real danger. In the infamous defense against the dark arts scene, his broken wand rebounds a curse that fills his own mouth with slugs. The sight is grotesque and pitiable, a warning of magical irresponsibility, yet also played for laughs. But laughter doesn't mask the fact that Ron is carrying a potentially hazardous artifact every day without adult intervention and without a magical fix. That, based on what we've already seen, should be easy. This isn't merely a moment of magical cherry-picking. It exposes a narrative convenience that undercuts the integrity of the universe. Magic, in Rowling's world, has rules. That is part of what makes it so enchanting. Its system, its structure, its limitations. When those rules are bent not for drama but for simplicity, something essential is lost. The audience's trust in the consistency of this magical world is fractured, just like Ron's wand. Let us not forget that Ron's wand was not a cheap accessory. It was a legacy object inherited from Charlie Weasley. While that may suggest its older age and vulnerability, it also gives it sentimental value and importance, and yet no attempt is made to repair it with the same urgency as Harry's glasses. The contrast is telling. Eyeglasses, mundane and muggle-born, are treated as more urgent than a tool fundamental to a wizard's identity. That's not just a narrative oversight, it's a value judgment, however unintentional. The irony deepens when we recall the significance of wands in wizarding duels and spellcasting. A wizard without a functioning wand is practically defanged. And yet, Ron continues through half the school year with a wand held together with spellotape, a crude muggle fix for a magical problem. In The Chamber of Secrets, Rowling writes, Ron's wand was still taped together, but he had to use it. It was all he had. It's a line that emphasizes his vulnerability and adds a layer of pathos, but it also circles back to the same question: why wasn't magical repair even attempted? There's also a thematic inconsistency in how damage and repair are treated. Harry's glasses are a symbol of his vulnerability and mortality, yet they are always quickly mended, almost as if to reassure both character and audience that he is safe and protected. Ron's wand, by contrast, becomes a symbol of persistent danger and misfortune, but this danger is avoidable. The plot hinges on it only because the writers chose not to treat the wand the same way they treated the glasses. In doing so, they bend the world's internal logic for the sake of drama and comedy. A further contradiction arises when we examine other examples of magical repair. In The Half-Blood Prince with Ifon, we see Hermione use reparo on broken items without issue. Even more compelling, in The Deathly Hallows, Harry uses the Elder Wand to fix his own broken wand, a feat previously considered impossible. Harry took his own wand from the pouch and laid it on the bed beside the Elder Wand. "Reparo," he said, "the spell works." This scene implies that wand repair is not only possible but canonically powerful. Granted, the Elder Wand is exceptional, but the idea is planted. Wands are not inherently unfixable. So why not try, even in vain, to fix Ron's wand? Wouldn't Hermione, ever the problem solver, at least propose it? Wouldn't the professors, especially someone like Professor Flitwick, the charms master, be concerned about the safety hazard posed by a broken wand? Instead, the matter is treated as a running gag, and the rules that govern magic are sacrificed at the altar of plot expediency. Even more striking is the absence of adult responsibility. No professor confiscates the dangerous wand, no letter is sent home, no replacement is suggested by McGonagall, who otherwise seems highly invested in the well-being of her students. The failure to treat this as a serious issue reflects not a magical reality, but a narrative shortcut. This undermines the audience's sense of cause and effect within the magical world. If spells work when it's convenient for the plot but fail, or are forgotten when they would complicate things, the stakes become less tangible. The world of Harry Potter thrives on believable magical constraints. It is those very constraints that make triumphs feel earned, that make danger feel real. Without them, magic becomes not a disciplined art, but a narrative crutch. It's easy to overlook moments like these when swept up in the sweeping music and visual wonder of the films. But for a story that asks its audience to believe in a hidden world of laws and logic, even small inconsistencies can echo loudly. When a simple spell fixes glasses but an entire subplot depends on the unresolved chaos of a broken wand, the audience is left wondering, is magic just whatever the plot needs it to be? The impact of this contradiction is more than structural. It colours the characters' motivations. Hermione, typically the most cautious and logical of the trio, does not suggest fixing Ron's wand. Ron, though desperate, doesn't plead for help. And Harry, who knows firsthand the importance of a functioning wand in a duel, says nothing. Their silence isn't just puzzling, it feels out of character, a moment when the writer's intentions override their personalities. And this affects how we perceive danger and solutions throughout the series. If wands cannot be fixed, then their damage should be treated with appropriate gravity. But if they can, and this option is simply ignored, then the danger becomes artificial, a manufactured problem rather than an organic one. Either path requires commitment. The films choose neither, leaving the audience suspended in an illogical middle. In the end, the Oculus Reparo moment stands as a microcosm of a larger issue, magical selectivity. Some things can be fixed with a flick, others apparently not, even if they are more essential, more dangerous, and more logically urgent. The spell itself is a beautiful flourish, but its casual use opens a fissure in the foundation of a story that demands internal consistency. And for all the power of magic, nothing breaks immersion quite like a rule that only sometimes applies. Number 25. The mysterious shard of Sirius's mirror Deathly Hallows Part 1. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, there's a moment of quiet desperation when Harry Potter pulls a mysterious shard of glass from his pocket and peers into it. In the reflection, a piercing blue eye stares back, an eye, unmistakably, like Albus Dumbledore's. Harry whispers to it, pleads even, and help eventually comes in the form of Dobby the house elf. But for any viewer who hasn't read the books, the entire scene feels like a strange fever dream. What is this piece of glass? Why is Harry talking to it? How did it help him? Where did it come from? None of these questions are answered in the film. And what could have been a poignant and emotionally loaded scene instead becomes one of the most bewildering, disjointed moments in the entire movie franchise. In the film, the shard of mirror appears without context. It is there suddenly with Harry in Grimmauld Place. We are given no explanation. The camera merely shows Harry clutching it, staring into it, with no suggestion as to its origin. This, in a series as narratively dense as Harry Potter, is a glaring omission. In a story that relies so much on cause and effect, on the legacy of magical objects, and the emotional resonance of artifacts passed between characters, it is bizarre to introduce a magical item at a critical moment in the plot without any exposition. For a franchise that built entire story arcs around the Elder Wand, the Marauder's Map, or Tom Riddle's diary, to neglect an explanation here is narratively jarring. In the book, however, the mirror shard has a history, a clear, touching, and logical history. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Sirius Black gives Harry a two-way mirror before he returns to Hogwarts. "Use it if you need to speak to me," Sirius says. Harry, stubborn and often overwhelmed, forgets about the mirror for most of the book. After Sirius's death at the hands of Bellatrix Lestrange, Harry finds the mirror in his school trunk and smashes it in grief. Later, in Deathly Hallows, we discover that Harry kept one shard from the broken mirror and has taken it with him on his journey. It's a remnant of Sirius, a symbol of his guilt, and a faint hope that maybe, somehow, he can still reach someone who loved him. Moreover, in the books, this mirror shard becomes a lifeline. Through it, Harry occasionally sees what he believes to be Dumbledore's eye, though this seems impossible. We later learn that Aberforth Dumbledore, Albus's estranged brother, has the twin mirror. It is Aberforth who sees Harry, recognizes his need, and sends Dobby to rescue him and his friends from Malfoy Manor. This twist not only ties up a minor arc from earlier books, but also introduces Aberforth in a meaningful way. It reveals his quiet watchfulness, his reluctant compassion, and the tragic remnants of the Dumbledore family's past. But none of this is in the movie. Aberforth is reduced to a brief appearance in Part 2, and the mirror is never properly explained. As a result, the emotional impact of Harry's plea and Dobby's rescue is undercut. The audience doesn't understand the significance of the object Harry holds. They can't feel the weight of his connection to Sirius or the sorrow wrapped up in that broken shard. And they certainly can't appreciate the moment when Aberforth, a character previously unknown to movie-only audiences, chooses to help Harry and essentially steps into the role his brother abandoned. What's particularly frustrating is how easy it would have been to include the explanation. A short scene at the beginning of the film, Harry opening his trunk, finding the shard, remembering Sirius, would have sufficed. Even a line of dialogue from Harry, murmuring something like Sirius's mirror, could have provided crucial context. Instead, the filmmakers opted for silence, and in doing so they created a magical object that feels like a deus ex machina, a plot device with no roots. This is not just confusing, it's lazy storytelling. The tragedy of Sirius Black was always entwined with Harry's sense of isolation. Sirius was the closest thing to a parent he had. The mirror symbolized a promise of connection, a line of communication in a world where Harry was so often cut off. When that promise is shattered, literally and emotionally, it becomes a powerful symbol of Harry's grief. In the book, the moment he finds the shard again, is heartbreaking. He keeps it not out of hope, but out of guilt and longing. It's not just a magical tool, it's a piece of a broken relationship. That subtext is completely lost in the film. When Harry looks into the shard and sees the blue eye, it's a moment layered with uncertainty and hope. In the book, he's not sure who it is. It looked like Dumbledore's eye, Rowling writes. But that couldn't be. The reader shares Harry's confusion and curiosity. Eventually, this leads to the revelation that Aberforth has been watching over them all along. That eye is not just a visual cue, it's a promise, a silent, stubborn form of protection. Aberforth's eye in the mirror reflects back at Harry, connecting the threads of the Dumbledore family's past and tying Harry into a larger web of legacy and loss. The absence of this explanation also cheapens Dobby's sacrifice. In the book, his arrival is unexpected but not inexplicable. The mirror offers a clue. Harry's plea into it is not random. It's a desperate hope that someone is watching. And someone is. Aberforth acts. Dobby arrives. And when he dies, it's not just the end of a loyal servant. It's the end of a thread of unseen protection that had quietly existed all along. In the movie, by contrast, Dobby's appearance feels sudden. His death, though tragic, lacks the emotional depth it carried in the book because we never saw the mechanism that brought him there. This failure of adaptation underscores a broader issue with the films, their willingness to abandon subtle emotional arcs in favor of pace and spectacle. The mirror shard may seem like a minor detail, but it embodies one of the key themes of Harry Potter: connection. The connections between characters, between past and present, between grief and hope. Removing the mirror's backstory unravels all of that. It turns a scene of longing and trust into one of confusion and distraction. And then there's Aberforth himself. In the book, his involvement is foreshadowed. The eye in the mirror, the presence in Hogsmeade, the goat references. When he finally appears, he's not just a plot device, he's a character with baggage, bitterness, and reluctant loyalty. "You've got your mother's eyes," he tells Harry, in a moment that echoes Snape, but carries a different kind of sadness. This is a man who lost his sister, fought with his brother, and now sees in Harry both the cost and the legacy of those wounds. None of this lands in the film because the mirror never paved the way.